The Zelver Dominion had ruled the stars for centuries, their empire spanning thousands of systems. No species had ever resisted them for long. When humanity dared to defy their rule, the war was inevitable. It wasn't a war of equals. The Zelver were older, stronger, and technologically superior. Their fleets outnumbered Earth's 100 to 1. Their weapons were more advanced, their strategy refined over millennia. They had crushed countless civilizations before, leaving only ruins in their wake. Humanity was just another obstacle to be erased. The war lasted longer than the Zelver expected. Humanity fought with desperation, with ingenuity, with a stubbornness that confounded their conquerors. But in the end, sheer numbers overwhelmed them. The last human stronghold, Vega Prime, became the final battlefield. Earth had already fallen. Mars was a wasteland. The outer colonies were nothing but drifting husks. Vega was where the last remnants of humanity made their stand, knowing there would be no reinforcements, no escape. The Zelver fleet descended like a storm, blotting out the sky. Thousands of warships rained fire down on the human defenders. The orbital defenses fell in hours. The planetary shield collapsed soon after. Cities burned. The ground itself trembled under the bombardment. Yet the defenders did not surrender. Every street was a battlefield. Every building became a fortress. Civilians, soldiers, even children fought. It was not a battle for victory. It was a battle to make the Zelver bleed for every inch they took. For weeks, the Zelver ground forces advanced through the ruined cities, meeting resistance in every corner. But it was a futile effort. Humanity was outgunned, outmatched. The last human command post was breached. The high-ranking officers were captured. The remaining soldiers were rounded up. The Zelver overlord, Krivzoran, demanded an end to the war. He wanted a display of absolute dominance, something that would break humanity's spirit forever. The captured humans, prisoners of war, officers, strategists, and even civilian leaders were transported to Zelver Prime. They were paraded through the streets in chains, humiliated before billions of alien spectators. The Zelver saw humans as nothing more than vermin that had overstepped their place in the galaxy. Their final punishment would be a spectacle. In the Grand Chamber of the Zelver High Council, the scene was set. A massive circular hall, illuminated by cold, sterile lights. The rulers of the Dominion sat in their ornate chairs, their faces emotionless. Behind them, enormous screens displayed the image of Krivzoran, his pale, elongated face devoid of pity. The humans, dressed in identical orange jumpsuits, stood in the center, bound and silent. They had fought for their people. Now they would die for them. No trial, no speeches, just a silent command. Ropes descended from the ceiling. The Zelver did not believe in quick executions. They believed in slow, public displays. One by one, the prisoners were lifted off the ground. Their legs kicked, their bodies writhed. The room remained silent. The Zelver did not cheer. This was not entertainment. It was a message broadcast across the galaxy. A warning to anyone who dared resist their rule. Humanity's greatest warriors, its leaders, its brightest minds, hanging like lifeless dolls. The images spread across every world. The last remnants of human civilization watched in horror as their heroes were erased from existence. Entire resistance cells went silent. Hope flickered. Fear took its place. Admiral Elias Voss watched from the bridge of the Retribution, a warship hidden in the asteroid belt of the Vega system. He had seen his friends, his comrades, his family executed like criminals. His hands trembled with rage, but he did not look away. He burned the image into his mind. Every detail, every moment. He would not forget. None of them would. The transmission ended. Silence filled the command deck. The crew of the Retribution stood motionless. Some wept. Others clenched their fists so tightly their knuckles turned white. Voss exhaled slowly, forcing down the grief, the anger, the helplessness. He turned to his officers, his voice like steel. "They think this will break us." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "They think humanity is finished." No one spoke. They didn't need to. They all felt the same fire burning inside them. They are wrong. Murmurs of agreement, quiet but firm. We do not beg, we do not kneel, and we do not forget. His eyes burned with fury. They will regret this day. I swear it. No one questioned him. No one hesitated. The fire had been lit. The Zelver had made their greatest mistake. They had not just killed prisoners. They had forged humanity's vengeance. Deep in the void, in the dark corners of what remained of human space, something shifted. Plans were made. Weapons were built. Old alliances rekindled. The war was not over. It had only just begun. The last transmission from Zelver Prime had spread like wildfire. Every surviving human colony, every hidden outpost, every resistance cell had seen it. The sight of their warriors hanging lifeless, their leaders executed without mercy, had driven a knife into the heart of humanity. But pain was temporary. Fear was fleeting. What remained was rage. Cold, unrelenting, and absolute. The scattered remnants of humanity did not cower. They did not beg for peace. They prepared for war. In the depths of Titan's frozen wastelands, beneath layers of ice and secrecy, the last great minds of Earth convened. Military strategists, rogue scientists, engineers who had once built ships of exploration now designed weapons of extinction. Humanity's last sanctuary had become a forge, and from its depths vengeance would rise. Every ship, every gun, every piece of technology was scrutinized, improved, weaponized. The old fleets had been built for defense, for diplomacy. That era was gone. The new fleets would be built for one purpose: annihilation. Titan's shipyards, long thought lost to the Zelver, roared back to life. Factories churned, research stations worked without rest. The war had not been lost. It had only changed. Admiral Voss stood before the assembled leaders of what remained. The high-ranking officers, the scientists, the operatives who had fought in the shadows. The room was silent, waiting. He placed a single image on the screen before them, the execution. The moment humanity had been humiliated. This is what they did to us. His voice was calm, measured, but the fire in his eyes burned bright. This is what they think we are. Weak, broken, defeated. He let the silence stretch before speaking again. They believe this was the end of our war. They are wrong. The room remained still, but he could feel the shift. Every person present had lost someone. Every person here had been waiting for the moment to strike. We have spent too long surviving, Voss continued. Now we take back what is ours. He motioned to the screen again. It shifted, revealing the first schematics of the Titan Armada. Warships larger, faster, deadlier than anything humanity had ever built. The Zelver thought they fought the best of us. They haven't seen what we can truly become. Murmurs of approval. A spark ignited. The Terran War Council is formed as of this moment. No factions. No borders. One humanity. One cause. He met the gaze of each leader in the room. We are no longer fighting for survival. We are fighting for revenge. For dominance. For the right to exist on our terms. A single voice from the back. What is the plan? Voss smiled. A grim, cold expression. Operation Black Phoenix. The details came swiftly. The Zelver had crushed humanity, but in doing so, they had revealed their own weaknesses. Their empire was vast, but it was stretched thin. Their fleets were powerful but reliant on centralized supply chains. Their leaders were strong but arrogant. Phase 1. Cut the Zelver's supply lines. Strike where they are weakest. Disable their fuel stations. Cripple their communication hubs. Make them bleed. Phase 2. Draw their forces into battle. Not a full engagement. Ambushes, precision strikes. Let them chase ghosts while humanity builds its true army in the shadows. Phase 3. Take the war to their homeworld. Not as prisoners, not as refugees, but as conquerors. For months, humanity became the nightmare the Zelver had never anticipated. Their supply routes vanished overnight. Their ships disappeared without a trace. Entire space stations went silent. The Zelver dominion, once unquestioned, began to falter. They sent more fleets, more patrols, but they found nothing except wreckage and death. Humanity was learning, adapting, surpassing. The war had changed, and now, for the first time, the Zelver were afraid. The Titan Armada neared completion. The Judgment Cannon, a weapon designed to rip through planetary shields in a single blast, awaited its final tests. The first AI-driven warships, capable of predicting enemy movements before they happened, stood ready for battle. But technology alone would not win this war. Voss knew that better than anyone. Humanity needed more than weapons. It needed fire. It needed purpose. It needed a symbol. He gathered his soldiers, the elite forces who would lead the charge when the time came. He played the execution video one last time. Let them watch. Let them remember. Never again, he said, voice like steel. Never again, they echoed. The war had begun. This time, humanity would not be the ones left hanging. The first strike came without warning. Zelver outposts along the outer rim of their empire went silent in a single night. Their supply depots detonated into firestorms before alarms could even be raised. The precision was inhuman, the efficiency terrifying. What had once been a scattered, desperate resistance had evolved into something unrecognizable, something lethal. The Zelver Dominion had crushed humanity's homeworld, executed its leaders, and declared their war over. Now they faced the consequences of their arrogance. Admiral Voss stood at the helm of the Retribution, the flagship of the Titan Armada. His fleet was no longer composed of scavenged remnants of the old human navy. These were ships built for vengeance, sleek, black, bristling with weapons that had never been tested in open war. They were faster, deadlier, more advanced than anything humanity had ever fielded before. The Zelver had given them time to evolve, and now they would pay for it. Operation Black Phoenix was in full motion. Phase 1 had crippled Zelver logistics. Their fuel stations were obliterated, their hyperspace relays jammed. Messages between their core worlds arrived weeks too late. Civil unrest began brewing on the fringes of their empire as once loyal colonies found themselves abandoned. Governors pleaded for aid that would never come. Supplies dwindled. Starvation crept in. The Dominion, which had ruled the galaxy with absolute control for millennia, now faced something it had never encountered before: chaos. Phase 2 had begun. Humanity did not face the Zelver in open combat. They hunted them. Fleets that once patrolled with impunity were now targets. Ambushes in asteroid fields. Warp space traps that left entire battalions stranded in the void. Precision strikes that disabled command ships before they even knew they were under attack. It was not war as the Zelver understood it. It was terror, methodical and unrelenting. The Zelver tried to adapt. They sent fleets to counterattack, to hunt the elusive human remnants. But for every battle they won, they lost 3 more. Their admirals grew desperate. The once mighty empire was bleeding, and the wounds refused to close. Voss watched it all from the command deck of his ship, tracking every move, every shift in the war. The Zelver still outnumbered them, still had superior firepower in direct confrontations. But numbers no longer mattered. The war was not about strength anymore. It was about control, and the Zelver were losing it. The time for the next step had arrived. Humanity had drawn the Dominion's fleets into a chase across the stars, stretched them thin. Now it was time to break them. The Titan Armada moved in silence, unseen, undetected. Hidden shipyards had produced the weapons of retribution, and now they were ready. The first target was chosen carefully, Zelver Prime's secondary command station. Not their homeworld, not yet, but a symbol of their control. A fortress thought to be unassailable. Until now, the assault was swift. The station's defenses, designed for frontal engagements, were useless against an enemy that appeared from the void itself. Human warships tore through the Zelver fleet like specters, their weapons designed not just to destroy, but to humiliate. Engines disabled, weapons offline, entire ships left adrift, defenseless. The surviving Zelver captains were forced to watch as their command station burned. The message was clear. Humanity had returned. Across the Dominion, the consequences were immediate. Panic spread through the core worlds. Fear took root where once there had been certainty. The Zelver elite, those who had sat in their council chambers and ordered humanity's execution, now faced the terrifying realization that their greatest mistake had not been allowing humans to live. It had been giving them a reason to hate. The Dominion's High Council convened in emergency session. Whispers of retreat, of negotiation, crept into the discussions. But Krivzoran silenced them with a single statement. If we do not end humanity now, they will end us. The order was given. Every Zelver fleet, every remaining warship was to be recalled. Defenses were to be hardened. No more arrogance. No more mercy. The full weight of the Dominion would be brought to bear. Voss expected this, had counted on it. The trap was nearly set. Humanity had forced the Dominion into a single course of action. And once the final phase began, there would be no turning back. The war was no longer about survival. It was about extermination. One side would be erased from history, and for humanity there was no doubt. They would be the ones left standing. The trap was set. The Zelver had gathered their fleets, consolidated their forces, prepared for a final, decisive battle. They had learned from their mistakes, abandoning arrogance for sheer overwhelming might. They did not search for humanity anymore. They knew where the final confrontation would take place. Earth, or what was left of it. Voss watched the Zelver armada gather from the bridge of the Retribution. The Dominion had committed everything, thousands of warships, their greatest commanders, even Krivzoran himself aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion. They believed this would be their moment of triumph, the final crushing blow that would erase humanity forever. They had no idea that they were walking into their own grave. The fleet that awaited them was not the scattered remnants of a broken race. It was the single greatest military force humanity had ever assembled. The Titan Armada was ready. Warships bristling with experimental weapons. AI-controlled battlecruisers that could react faster than any organic commander. Stealth ships already embedded deep within the Zelver formations, waiting for the signal. Every tactical advantage had been calculated, every possible Zelver maneuver accounted for. Humanity had studied them, adapted, evolved. Now they would be the ones teaching the lesson. The Zelver entered the Sol system, their fleet spreading out, encircling Earth's ruins. They saw no resistance, no defenses. It was too easy. Krivzoran stood on the bridge of his ship, watching, waiting. Something felt wrong. Then the stars themselves turned against them. From the darkness of space, from asteroid fields thought to be empty, from the very wreckage of Earth's orbital debris, the Titan Armada struck. Entire Zelver squadrons vanished in an instant, their ships torn apart before they could even raise their shields. Stealth cruisers emerged from the void, unleashing pinpoint strikes that disabled capital ships in seconds. AI warships predicted every Zelver countermove before they could execute it. The Dominion's fleet, so used to dictating the pace of war, was suddenly on the defensive. Voss stood silent as reports flooded in. The plan was working. The Zelver's tightly packed formation turned against them as human warships cut through their ranks like a scalpel through flesh. Their vast numbers became a liability, their commanders too slow to adapt. Panic rippled through their forces. It was the beginning of the end. Krivzoran barked orders, demanding a full-scale counterattack, ordering his ships to regroup. But they had no room to maneuver. Human vessels wove between them, precise and merciless, slicing apart command ships, disrupting chains of command. The Zelver were not just losing a battle. They were being dismantled. Then came the final blow. The Judgment Cannon, humanity's ultimate weapon, had remained hidden until now. A warship unlike any other, a weapon designed not just to defeat the Zelver, but to erase them. Powered by technology stolen, repurposed, and perfected, it fired a single shot. A beam of energy so concentrated, so precise, that the shields of the Eternal Dominion collapsed instantly. The Zelver flagship, the symbol of their empire's power, was split in half before Krivzoran could even react. The Zelver fleet broke. Their will shattered. Thousands of ships attempted to flee, but there was no escape. Humanity did not grant mercy. The same cold, ruthless efficiency the Zelver had once used against them was returned in full. Ship by ship, the Dominion's forces were wiped from existence. Voss stood on the bridge, watching the destruction unfold, listening to the silence of his crew. There was no cheering, no celebration, only the weight of what they had done. The war was over. The Zelver were finished. But there was one last message to send. Across the galaxy, every remaining Zelver world received the same transmission. The execution chamber, the nooses. But this time it was not human prisoners hanging. It was the Zelver High Command, the architects of genocide, the rulers of a fallen empire. One by one they were erased just as they had once erased others. The cycle had come full circle. Humanity had not just survived. It had conquered. The Zelver Dominion, once the strongest empire in the galaxy, was now a memory. And in its place humanity rose. No longer prey, no longer victims, the new rulers of the stars.